This supported study resource focuses on Higher French Paper 1 Reading and Translation. This video will also give you tips to be able to answer the questions, and we will look at a worked example using the 2019 past paper. In this video, I'm going to show you how to go about answering the reading questions, what the marker is looking for, top tips to be able to answer the questions. I'll also show you how to go about answering the overall purpose question, and then we will look at how to tackle the translation. By the end of this video, you should be able to know how to go about answering the different question types in the higher reading paper, how to answer the overall purpose question, and how to answer the translation. You should also know what the examiner is looking for each part of the paper, and through looking at the marking instructions, you will get a better idea of the level of detail required in your answers. Throughout the lesson, you may see some of these symbols on the slides to indicate what you should do. Here are the symbols which may be used and what they mean. You will need a pen or a pencil, a French dictionary, the Higher French 2019 past paper, specifically Paper 1 Reading Directed Writing, some lined paper or a jotter. You may also wish to have some highlighters or different coloured pens or pencils. In the exam, you will get both the reading and the directed writing papers at the same time. You will have 2 hours in which to complete both parts. Please note that at no part during your exam will anybody tell you when to move on to the next section. You can choose whether you want to start with the reading or the directed writing. In this video, we are going to look at the reading paper. For the reading paper, you will be given one text of approximately 600 words. The questions and the answers you will give are in English. You are allowed to use a dictionary. The reading section is worth 20 marks. You are then asked to provide a translation of an underlined section of the text. This translation is worth 10 marks. Notice that the translation is worth half the marks of the reading questions. It is therefore worth spending a good amount of time on this to ensure you can get the highest number of marks possible. I would recommend spending around 10 to 15 minutes on the translation. If you're struggling, you can always move on to the directed writing, then come back to the translation later on with fresh eyes. I am now going to talk you through the past paper from 2019. If you want, you can pause the video now and spend around about an hour and 20 minutes on both the reading and the translation section before we go over the answers. For the reading paper, it's a good idea to read the introduction because this gives you a summary in English of what you're about to read. So in this example from the 2019 past paper, it tells us that the article is going to talk about summer jobs, including some of the writer's own personal experiences. It's also worth reminding you at this point that you need to answer your questions in English. Once you have read the paper's introduction, you then want to make sure that you read the French text in full to get a better understanding of the text as a whole. You can then read all of the questions to help you with your understanding of the entire paper. In any reading paper, the questions will look similar to the example on screen. You will be told to reread certain lines so that you know that the questions and the answers you're expected to give will only come from that particular section. Each question will have marks allocated to it, so you know how much information you are required to give. In example 1A, it says state any two things. If you see the word any, this indicates that there will be more answers than you are required to give. This means that you can choose whichever answers you find easiest to understand. However, in questions 1B and 1C, the word any does not appear. This means that there will be only that number of answers, and you have to write both of them in order to get both marks. For the higher paper, you will write your answers in a separate answer booklet to the question booklet. Make sure you clearly indicate which question you are answering. You will not get any marks if you have written the answers beside the wrong question number. This will also help you ensure you have not missed out any of the questions. The first thing you should do when reading the questions is read the summary. Question 1 tells us that the article discusses the increasing popularity of summer jobs. This will help you to get a better understanding of the section that you are answering. In question 1A, we want to look for the key words that tells us what sort of question we are being asked. In this case, why? Why are young people looking for a summer job? We're now going to read the French, and we can see in the first sentence we have some facts and figures and a variety of different jobs that people can do. We can ignore this as we know that the question is asking us why. I also recommend that you highlight the question and the answer. This will help you to note where the answer begins and ends, and at higher level it means that you are less likely to miss out key information that is required in your answer. Next, as we are looking for two things, we want to separate out where the different answers are. You can do this by putting a line between the different sections of the answer. Often this will come with an apostrophe or a conjunction such as and, but, because, or in this case the word or. So we've now isolated our three different answers. As we're only asked for two of them, you can then choose which two answers you want to give. In the marking scheme, certain words or phrases are either in bold or underlined. This means that the person marking it has to see this in your answer in order to give you the mark. So in question 1A, why do people look for a summer job? You could say they want to save money or save money for financing their studies or their education. You could say that they want to pay for their driving license or their driving permit. Or the third answer, you could say treat themselves to designer or branded clothes. As this is higher level, it is not enough to say to buy clothes. The marker is looking to see, can you understand the text in more detail? So by highlighting the entire answer, that means you are much less likely to miss out these key bits of information. Another technique that you can use to help you find the answers is to use the wording of the question, as this is often reflected in the French text. This also happens in your listening paper. So for question 1B, we have sectors such as tourism and banking. This is reflected in the text as it says les secteurs du tourisme et des banques. This means we know our answer is about to start here. So again, I'm going to highlight all of it so that I make sure I do not miss out any key information that I may need later on. I'm then going to identify the key word in the question to find out what sort of information I am now looking for. I know that this question is out of 2 marks, so again I'm going to try and work out where answer 1 ends and answer 2 begins. If I look up any word in the dictionary, I might underline it so that I remember that's the one I've looked up, and in the margin I might add in any other varieties in the translation given to me by the dictionary. This means that I don't forget what it means, and also then later on I can work out the best translation that makes sense with the rest of my answer. For this answer in question 1b, the examiner was looking for you to be able to say that the sectors such as tourism and banking are overwhelmed, or they were very busy, or they were overloaded. In your answer, try not to give alternatives. Answer 2 was that they were needed to replace or to stand in for employees or the staff or the workers, and note that the underlined bit, who go on holiday, would need to be in your answer in order to get the mark. For question 1c, again, I'm going to highlight my question and I'm going to try and find the same wording in the French so that I know where my answer starts. I'm then going to highlight this to the end so that I don't miss anything out. I know that there are two different answers, so I'm going to try and find where answer 1 ends and answer 2 begins. In this case, this is especially important as answer 1 goes on to the second line. In the answers, you will see that the word work is underlined. This means that you will have to be able to translate du monde du travail and not stop at the end of le candidat n'a pas d'expérience, otherwise you will not get the mark. Remember, at higher level, the examiner is looking for you to put as much detail into your answers as possible. It's important to then make sure that you keep reading to the end of the sentence. For the second answer, we know that the word manque can mean miss or missing, or a lack of or lacking. At the moment, we are not sure which translation is best, so we're going to have to work out the rest of the sentence around it. Once we've done that, we can choose which word for manque makes the most sense in English. In this case, we're looking for lacking maturity, or the person is not mature enough, or perhaps even they are less mature. Although the word sometimes is in brackets, you should probably try and put this into your answer because you will not know whether that is required information or not. Note in the right-hand side of the marking instructions that it is not enough to just say that the person is not mature, as this does not provide an accurate translation of the French with the phrase il manque. The next question again will tell you which lines and which section to read. Question 2a talks about the golden rule. So when we are then reading the French, we can see it begins with selon la loi, according to the law. We need to then keep reading until we find the phrase golden rule. This doesn't appear until the next paragraph. This means that everything before it is probably irrelevant, but it's important to read it anyway, just in case. Again, I'm going to highlight the answer so that I do not miss anything out. And the expected answer in 2a is that you should not wait until the last moment or the last minute to look or to search for or to apply for a job. In question 2b, we are looking for priorities that we should identify at the start of the process. Again, I'm going to read the French to find any reflection of the question in the text, and I'm going to highlight that so that I can easily identify it. We know that we have to state any two things, so I'm going to separate out where the different answers are. Please note in this one, the third answer is particularly long, and it has a comma and a conjunction in it. You would have to translate all of that to get that mark. The expected answers for 2b are if you just want to earn money or if you're just in it for the money. The second answer you could give is if you want a real or a true or a genuine experience, and you'll have to mention the word future. The third answer you could give is if you would prefer to work with children or with kids, behind a desk, or outdoors or outside. Note you will have to mention all of this in order to get the mark. Sometimes the questions will be split into two further parts, but we can apply the same strategy and use the wording in the question to find and locate the answer in the text. For Part C, Part 1, the answer is a job involving contact or interacting or working with the public, such as a waiter. Note that at higher level, it is highly unlikely that you will ever just be giving one word as an answer. For question 2, Part C, Part 2, again, the phrasing weaker language skills will be reflected in the text. We're only looking for one answer, but I'm going to separate them out so I can see where one answer ends and the other begins, so that I make sure I put in all of the relevant information. For Part 2, your expected answers would be doing or washing the dishes, and the second answer would be gathering or collecting or picking up fruit and vegetables. You will have to mention both of those in order to get the mark. You also have to give more detail in this answer to talk about where specifically it is you're doing it. In this case, southern countries or countries in the south. If you notice in the right-hand side of the marking scheme, unacceptable answers include in the south of the country or countries in the south. It is important that you accurately translate what is said in the French. We're now going to move on to question 3. Within the section related to question 3, the word BAFA appears with a little asterisk. If you see this in the French text, if you look at the bottom of the entire text, you will see a translation of what this means. Usually it is something cultural that often doesn't have a direct translation or that we do not have in our country. In this case, BAFA is a brevet d'aptitude aux fonctions d'animateur, or the best English translation would be a diploma for young leaders and workers. For question 3, you are asked who helped her to find this job. So I'm going to highlight the entire answer because although it says my best friend, at higher level, you need to give more information than that in order to get the mark. So for question 3A, you need to specify it was her best friend and the fact that her friend had already been working there. Sometimes in the question, you are given one of the example answers. This means you shouldn't give this as one of your answers, you need to find the rest of the answers from the text. Again, highlighting everything, we need to give all 3 answers, so we want to separate them out so that we know where they are. The first answer you're looking for is that she had to look or collect or get or find the wood for the evening campfire. The second answer, you have to be specific here and say that the person had to check the tyres and the brakes specifically on the bikes. You will notice that the last answer that you need to give is very long. In this example, you need to get across the idea that they need to sort out the rubbish or the waste and recycle it, both the plastic and the glass. We're now going to look at question 4. Often in the higher French reading papers, some of the answers you're expected to give will appear as quotes from experts. This will appear within quotation marks as seen here. Again, I'm going to highlight my question and indicate the relevant section of the text. I'm then going to separate out all of the different answers so that I can be sure that I am translating each answer accurately and giving as much detail as possible. For question 4A, the answers you could give are, it is the first step or the first stage or the first point to convince or to persuade businesses or companies or employers. You could also give the answer of it shows who you are and your strengths or your good points or your attributes. The third answer you could give is that it shows what distinguishes you or makes you different or makes you stand out from other candidates. Please note that we are not accepting the answer of why you are better, as the French is much more specific about its answer. Question 4b asks you what you should include in your letter of application. Once you've highlighted the relevant French section, you will see that quite a lot of that is just reflecting what the question says. Note in your answer you need to say how or why as an accurate translation of the word comment. This is a good point to reflect on what we have covered so far. If you want to, you can pause the video and take notes about the different steps you can take to help you tackle the reading questions. When tackling the reading questions, I recommend the following steps. Firstly, highlight the question. Then, use the wording of the question to find the relevant section of the text. Highlight the text to ensure that you have found all of the answers and you won't miss anything out. Then, underline the important words in the question so that you know what you are being asked and the information that you are looking for. Check the number of marks so that you know how much detail to put into your answer. Then, read the French carefully, ensuring that you go to the end of the sentence. Separate out the different answers if there are more than one. Keep a note of any words that you look up in the dictionary, especially if there are various answers. Write down your answers to the question. And finally, read over your answer to check that it makes sense in English and it has as much detail in it as possible. Here is a recap of what we've covered so far regarding the reading paper questions. Make sure that you read the questions carefully so that you know what information you are being asked to give. The wording of the questions will be reflected in the French text to help guide you through and find the answers. Highlight the relevant section of the text so that you know where all the answers are. If you separate the answers depending on the number of marks, you can make sure that you don't miss out any important details. Make sure that you read the French carefully so that you can answer the questions in as much detail as possible. Also, make sure that you check that your tense is accurate. You are also not required to write in full sentences or to repeat the question in your answer. Instead, you can use bullet points and just write down the specific answers that you want to give. If you have highlighted the text and the questions, your paper may now look something like this. I've done them in different colours just to make it stand out, but you can do them in the same colour. This will then help you with the overall purpose question. We are now going to look at how to answer the overall purpose question. As the name suggests, the overall purpose question asks you to consider the article as a whole. If you have highlighted the text as you have gone along, it will be easy to see the bits that are left over. For the overall purpose question, you should take your answers from sections that you haven't already used. You will get no marks for repeating answers to the questions that you have already been asked. You will also get no marks if you quote directly in French from the text. In the overall purpose question, you are being asked to determine the author's opinion of the topic and back up your answer with evidence from the text. In the overall purpose question, the author's opinion may be positive or negative or both. Make sure that you read the question carefully. In this example from the 2019 paper, It is important to note that you are being asked about finding a job, not the benefits of having a job. To get full marks, you should structure your answer by directly answering the question. Then give at least 2 justifications from the text to back up the answer that you have given. Remember not to quote from the text in French. Write in English to show that you have understood the text. In this example from the 2019 paper, the correct answer is that the author is optimistic to a certain extent, but has some reservations. You should then give both positive and negative examples, such as, there is a wide range of jobs available, but for some you need experience. For the overall purpose question then, make sure that you read the question carefully so that you know what you are being asked. Use sections of the text that you have not already given as an answer to previous questions. Read the French carefully so that you know the author's viewpoint. Put as much detail into your answer. Structure your answer to ensure that you've answered the question and back this up with evidence from the text. We are now going to look at how to do the translation. In the translation, you will be asked to translate the underlined section of the text into English. This will be worth 10 marks, with 2 marks allocated per section or sense unit. You need to make sure that your translation is accurate and conveys all of the essential information and relevant details. It also needs to make sense in English. Check that you have accurately translated the tense and that you have not missed anything out. Avoid using forward slashes or giving alternative answers. If you have time, you may want to make a rough draft and then rewrite it so that it is neat and legible. Here are some things to look out for when tackling any translation. Make sure you know what tense each verb is in and the subject that goes along with it. At higher level, this may be more tricky, as the subject may be split from the verb with a negative, or it may refer back to something or someone previously mentioned. Verb endings can help you work out the subject. Also watch out for L in the singular or plural that refers back to a singular or plural noun. Would the best translation be she, or it, or they? Articles are often used in French, but not always required in your English translation. Conversely, you may need to add one into your translation to make it sound more natural in English. Be careful though not to change between definite and indefinite articles, and by that I mean swapping a to the or vice versa. Prepositions are little words that can trip you up when translating. It is important to think of the context of what you are translating in order to come up with the best possible translation. You may have to change the word order to make your translation sound more natural in English. In doing so, make sure you haven't changed the meaning of what was written in French. Some words may be spelled the same, but will have different meanings depending on the type of word. For example, if it is a noun or a verb. It is important to read around these words to look for contextual clues, for example, articles or pronouns. Negative constructions at higher level are likely to be more advanced than just ne pas. They may also be used with more complex tenses. Reflexive verbs and pronouns at higher level are more likely to be used in complex structures and tenses. The English equivalent may not require a reflexive pronoun to be used. Some set verbs in French are not reflexive but still require a reflexive pronoun. These verbs may have a different meaning when used without the reflexive pronoun. For example, trouver, meaning to find, would change to to be situated or to be located when used with the reflexive pronoun as se trouver. If you see the words le, la, les, check whether they are being used as articles or they might be being used as direct object pronouns. If you see what looks like a reflexive pronoun, for example, me or se, check if it is being used as an indirect object pronoun. Relative pronouns are used as connectors, and they are used to link relative clauses to main clauses to avoid repeating subjects and objects previously mentioned. The English translations of these will vary depending on the context, or you may find that they may not be needed in your English translation. Try to use the same punctuation in the same places in your English translation as the author used in the original French. For the translation, the question will tell you which bits you are required to translate and which lines you will find it. In the text, it will be easily identified as it will be underlined. This means that in our example, we do not need to worry about the first sentence as it does not form part of the translation. We are now going to take each section or each sense unit and try to translate those into English. When attempting the translation, make sure that you do it after you have completed the reading questions so that you have a better understanding of the text and the context in general. Read the translation carefully from beginning to end and try to make sense of it before you start to write. Read what comes before and after the translation so that you can put the translated section into context. Section 1, or Sense Unit 1, of our example translation is further split into two other sections, with each part being marked as good, satisfactory, or unsatisfactory. If you get unsatisfactory in one of these sections, you will get 0 marks for the entire section or sense unit. Let's look at this one in more detail. What the examiner is trying to see is, can you accurately translate en revanche and put that into good English? You may use it as however, but in this particular case, on the other hand, is a better translation. In the next bit, j'ai adoré, that is in the past tense or the passé composé. So the examiner is checking to see, can you accurately translate that tense, which is why in the unsatisfactory box, I love in the present tense is not deemed a satisfactory answer. You should translate the phrase le contact avec as contact with, because changing it to spending time with or even working with is too far from the meaning in French. In Sense Unit 2, this is again split into two subsections for marking. You need to make sure that your translation is accurate to the French while making sure it makes sense in English. You can see this in the first subsection. In the second subsection, you can see in the unsatisfactory box that a translation in the incorrect tense is not accepted unless it is a repeated error from Sense Unit 1. What this means is that you will not be penalised for the same tense error twice, as long as you are consistent. An accurate translation would be, originating from the Paris region, they sometimes needed to be comforted. Note that your translation of the pronoun il could be they, or you, or we, or one, depending on how you want to translate the rest of that section. A satisfactory answer would be I sometimes had to comfort them, or they sometimes needed comfort, because although it does convey the message, it's not quite as accurate as the examples in good worth 2 marks. In Sense Unit 3, the examiner is checking to see if you can accurately translate this type of structure. The correct answer would be because they missed their family, which means if you mix this up, an unsatisfactory answer would be because their family missed them. In this example, you are trying to show your understanding that the word leur means 2 different things based on the word order and the differences between the word order in French and in English. In this example, in Sense Unit 4, the examiner is checking to see that you can accurately translate superlatives and negative constructions also in the imperfect tense. An accurate translation for Sense Unit 4 would be the youngest were only 5 years old, or the youngest ones were only 5 years old. In this example for Sense Unit 5, the key things to note are don't forget to translate any conjunctions. Note the use of the present tense. Don't be tempted to change it to match the past tense used previously. An accurate translation would be, and at that age, 2 weeks is a long time when you were far from home. Note that the pronoun on in the bottom section can be translated as you, or one, or they. Note in the satisfactory box that a translation of the pronoun on as we isn't going to be as good as you or one or they. To sum up, for the translation, you want to make sure that you have only translated the underlined section. Make sure that what you have written is accurate to the French and that you have included all the essential information and relevant details. Read over your entire translation from beginning to end to make sure that it makes sense in English. If it doesn't make sense, then it is highly likely that what you have written is incorrect and this will not gain you any marks. Check you have accurately translated any tenses. You may wish to score out the words in the French text as you have translated them to ensure that you haven't missed anything out. Avoid giving different answers. If you have time, prepare a rough draft and then rewrite it so that it is legible. In this video, we have looked at the Higher French reading paper. We have talked about how to go about answering the reading questions. We have looked at how to go about answering the overall purpose question. And we have looked at how to do the translation. Hopefully by now, you have a better idea of how to answer the higher reading paper questions and know what the examiner is looking for. You should also have a better understanding of the overall purpose question and how to go about structuring your answer. You should also now know how to go about answering the translation. By now, you should also have a better understanding of what the examiner is looking for, and you should be able to use the marking instructions to ensure that you're putting enough detail into your answers. What should you do now? Well, I would recommend that you try to read as much French as possible. You can find newspapers and books, magazines and other articles for free online. Also, try as many past papers as you can find. These are usually available on the SQA past paper website. You may also get some from your teacher. Use the marking instructions to help you to understand what the marker is looking for and the level of detail you are required to put into your answers. You can also use these past papers to see the variety in the types of overall purpose questions that have previously been asked, and use the marking instructions to see how you should go about answering them. Try as many translations as possible. You could also try to translate other sections of written French that you have found in the newspapers or online articles. Ask your teacher to mark any work that you do and provide you specific feedback on what you need to do in order to be able to improve. The more you read and the more you practice translating from French into English, the easier this will be for you.